15,000 chats that
And
we
we're
have. That today I was going to talk about listing appointments and kind of what to talk about and what to maybe do a little bit while you're there. Some people, you've been going on them, 30, 40, 50, 60, 100, if you're Daniel, 2,000, something like that, whatever. But there's also stuff that like you learn from other people as well when you do these listing appointments. There's stuff that you can learn if you're only been in the business for like a month, or there's stuff you can learn if you've been in the business for 4 or 5 years. It's so cool to be able to hear the way different people do it. So I'd also encourage you guys as well, just to like, after this meeting, if you've ever practiced doing your listing presentation to other people, to maybe think about doing that, just because it's not only going to be beneficial for you to hear yourself talk about it out loud, because that's where you catch your errors, but also it's going to help you out in the other person, because they're going to learn different techniques and stuff like that. But anyway, so I wrote down my notes. Let me find my notes real quick. So I'm just going to kind of go ahead and start again. So most of us have been on listing appointments, and most of us, if we were honest, have walked out of a listing appointment saying basically one of two phrases. You're either thinking to yourself, I nailed this, there's no way I don't get it, or you walk out going, I'm really not sure what I did, but that did not go well. Either way, sometimes the difference between these two reactions is very obvious, and sometimes it's plain to see. And in your head, you can pinpoint a moment or a topic or something where you realized by either doing or saying something or not doing or saying something, you either caused it to be the meeting to go well, or that was where it all turned and went bad. So in saying that, there's also a third option. Kind of sometimes it happens, and it's when you think away walking that you nailed it, when in fact it can't be further from the truth. So you actually have like a a false sense of I did this really well, when in fact you didn't do it well. Or maybe some of you guys haven't even gone on some listing appointments yet, or maybe you've only gone on one or two, and basically like that is like your biggest fear in this instance, is sitting in front of someone in their own home, talking to them, trying to get them their opinion on, you're giving your opinion on what their home is worth, and trying to convince them why you're the best choice to help them sell it. But whatever your situation is going into this, I believe that there are a few things that everyone should do or be doing at a listing appointment, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. But I want to make one statement that I also believe is equally as true, if not the most important throughout all of this, and that's this: when you go into a listing appointment, you have to be you. You have to be genuine. You cannot take someone else's script word for word and use it as your own if it doesn't match who you are. So take what I say today, but put your own spin on it. Do it in your way, make it your own. If you want to be successful in this business, you can model yourself after someone, but you still have to be you. Like I said, there's great scripts, there's great modelings, there's great ways to do stuff. But if you come across as just being like a robot by repeating somebody else, that's not you. That's not who you are. So be you when you go into these things. So that being said, let me cue up the whole PowerPoint. Oh gosh, I got to remember how to do this. All right, hold on a second. Present now.
PowerPoint.
Yes, exactly.
That's exactly what I was thinking of. Welcome to Microsoft PowerPoint. Would you like to take a demo?
Wait, hold on. All right. Did that work?
Cat was pointing with power.
Did
Yes,
that work?
I see it.
Can y'all see it?
Yeah, you got to switch to that screen.
I had muted myself, Duke, but that did make me laugh out loud.
Oh crap! I shouldn't have. I can't even read my. Oh, here, hold on. Okay, couldn't find my own notes anymore. All right. So if everybody can see that, or everybody want to switch that screen, I will start kind of doing the actual presentation thing here. All right. So as many as you know, this has nothing to do with the presentation, but I think it's funny. As many as you know, I love the Office TV series. I'm watching it through again for maybe the 9th time or something like that. And I'm in the middle of season 3 at the moment. But additionally, many of you know that my name is also Michael Scott Gibson, which I use as a funny topic of conversation to bring up with a potential client. They usually get a good laugh at it. But I'm actually bringing this up. There actually is a point behind it, which is you guys know who Andrew Bernard in the show. And in the show, when the Stanford branch closes and he ends up moving and joining the Scranton branch, right before he comes into the office the first time, there's that little cutscene And he says he wants to be the number 2 man in charge of the office, and he's going to do it by 3 simple things. And he says he's going to do name repetition, personality mirroring, and never breaking off a handshake. And the truth actually is that this is actually how he nailed how to get someone to like you. We talk about these a little bit during the meeting, so I just wanted to kind of point out that I'll reference it a little bit, but 2 of those things, don't do handshakes right now. But 2 of those things are actually pretty important when it comes to do a listening appointment. So the first one is being on time. You cannot, and I want to say that emphatically, you cannot be late to a listening appointment. You have gotten someone to set aside time in their day to invite you into their home for you to then give them your best pitch. Your best pitch cannot start with the sentence, "Sorry, I'm late." Not cool. That cannot happen. They want to know that you are going to take care of them with precision and first-rate professionalism. In case you're wondering, being late to an appointment does not give off that type of vibe. It gives off the vibe of either not caring or not being organized enough to be there on time. Both of those are terrible vibes and are not something you want to present to them. Google directions, leave 10 minutes early. If you end up being way too early, drive around the neighborhood. I've done this before. Drive around the neighborhood and familiarize yourself with it if you're not. Maybe make a mental note of other for sale signs you might see in the neighborhood, because I know 9 times out of 10, if I go into a listing appointment and there's another house for sale, at some point that homeowner is going to bring it up. Boom. You already know exactly what house they're talking about just purely because you drove around the neighborhood and actually looked at it. You know exactly where it is. If you really are just like, there's nowhere to go, okay, then pull into the gas station 2 minutes down the road, sit there and review your material again. Make sure you know what you're going to talk about. Review facts about this home so you're very familiarized with it. But whatever you do, you cannot be late to a listing appointment. That's already just if they're competing with another agent, every other agent's on time and you're the only one that's late, you're already starting off on a peg down from everybody else. Not cool. Greet everyone with a smile and repeat their names back to them. AKA, that's, in case you're remembering, that's step 1 in Andrew Bernard's plan. I would also say shake their hand, but again, you don't want to catch the plague right now, so don't do that. But yeah, honestly, you got to be happy. You got to present yourself. You may have just been, and I typed up something, you may have just been slapped in the face by your best friend, had a bird poop on you, stepped in dog crap. I don't care. The moment you step out of your car and start walking towards that house, you leave your baggage in the car and you be happy to see them. You have to be happy, you have to be pleasant, and you got to repeat their names back to them when you greet them. You guys have probably heard me say this before. I am terrible with name recognition, remembering people's names. The only way you can do that is by repeating their names when they, hey, my name is Dave. Well, nice to meet you, Dave. By doing that, but also as you're going throughout this listening appointment, repeat their names to them. Keep saying it. Name repetition. It's going to help you remember it. But it's also people like to hear their own names out loud. They like to hear their names being repeated. There's this weird thing to it. So by using their name, you give them a slight bit of recognition and importance, both of which make them feel good, put you in a better light in their mind, even if it is just subconsciously. So you've gotten out of your car, you've greeted them, you're on time, you're doing good so far. Take a tour. That would be great. Take a tour of the home. Like I said, you showed up on time. You're happy to meet the entire family. It could be a cookie cutter home that you've been in this same model 15,000 times. Does not matter. Take a freaking tour of the home. A couple of things occur from this that I believe are very, very important when it comes to the success of the listening appointment. Number one, for the most part, people like their home. They take pride in their home, and maybe they aren't taking pride in all of it, but there's going to be something in that tour that they're going to show you and be very proud of the way it looks, or that they did it on their own, or that they made it, or whatever. But if you didn't take the tour, they don't get the chance to show it to you, and you don't get to take a mental note of it and bring it back up later on. This is also a part of how you accomplish Andrew Bernard's steps of personality mirroring. You aren't going to know much about their personality if you don't take a tour, if you go straight to the kitchen and sit down and start talking. The tour gives you the opportunity to learn about their home and about how they interact and talk. Are they quick to get to the point type of people, or they stay there and chat about something on and on and on about everything for no reason type of people? You need to be able to identify this. You need to be able to see, what type of personalities do they have in order to actually then match that later. Another two reason to take a tour of the home is to look at their stuff and find common points of interest. I do this. I practice this a lot, and I find it very successful. But it doesn't have to be like common points of interest. It can also just be like, let's say you look through the house. There's nothing common points of interest, but you do find some stuff that you are, let's say, knowledgeable about or have interest in. Okay, then feign interest in it. Um, oh gosh, I love that book. Wasn't it great when blah blah blah? Or oh, you're a Cowboys fan. What do you think you guys are going to do this year? Or oh, you notice all the fishing equipment in the garage, and you say something like, "Man, it's been such a long time. You have a spot around here you enjoy going to." Find commonalities and use them to your advantage. Obviously, the ultimate goal is to get the person to pick you as the agent to help them sell their home based upon your merit, but other factors play into people's decision making. For instance, are you a likable person, or does this homeowner think that you guys can get along? So give them reasons to believe that you guys could get along. If not, be your best friend, right? But the intent behind this is you have to do that. Number three, reason to take a tour so you can actually see what you're trying to sell. They may have told you on the phone that their home is immaculate, but we have all been in homes where we have heard that and we've gone in and realized that the definition of immaculate is apparently differing between households, right? You've based your comps based upon what their description is, and then you walk in and realize their description was crap, and actually their house isn't worth what you've then now said. So you need to see all the positive features, but you also need to see all the negative features. After the tour, when you are finally sitting down and doing your actual presentation, you need to have, and I'm going to call it metaphorical ammo in your gun to be able to justify why you are giving a certain price in comparison to others. The tour of the home is going to be what provides you with this mental ammo that you're going to be able to then use. All right, so we've shown up on time. We've greeted with happy faces. We've taken the tour inside and outside. From this, we've gathered points of interest and taken mental notes of facts. What do we do now? Well, now we sit down, and we preferably sit down in the kitchen table. And there, because I want you guys to, Daniel and I have talked about this. I know we've had other people talk about this, but you want to sit down at the kitchen table because the kitchen is where the family sits. The kitchen is where friends sit. That's what you want to be in this instance. Now, don't get me wrong. If they make a beeline for the living room, or they go straight to their formal dining room table, and it's just like it almost looks like it would be inconvenient to not sit in the kitchen, that's fine. But if they kind of leave it open ended, or they end up, they're not really talking, and the tour's just kind of ended, and you're kind of hanging out for a second. I mean, you could say something like, "Thank you so much for the tour of your house. Hey, can we sit right here?" And just start walking towards the kitchen table. But I know that sounds kind of silly, but that is something that there's that subconsciousness to it. Being at the kitchen table means your family, means you're a friend. So what do you do next? You need to get everything out and get everything ready. A presentation is all about showing your professionalism and showing you're together, and showing how much you prove, you're going to be the person they want to pick. And it's also about carrying momentum a little bit throughout the process. Nothing's going to kill that more if, like, you get ready to go your presentation, you're talking, and all of a sudden you pause and you're like, "Oh wait, let me get out my iPad so I can show you X," or "Oh, let's scroll through here. Oh, you know what? Hold on a second, I can't find my pen. Let me find my pen real quick." So you need to have everything out. So I mean, typically for me, when I go to these, I have my iPad, I have my printouts of whatever I'm going to have with me, and I have a notepad, and I have a pen with me. I get all of that out at one time. Have that ready. Be ready to actually then go. So again, you don't want to lose that momentum. One last thing right here, and I can kind of tell that I threw it in here because I thought about it later, not being prepared. Silence your phone the moment you walk in their front door. You want them to believe that if you take them on as a client and they choose you, that they're going to be your first priority. You cannot do that or prove that in this meeting if your phone goes off and you answer it, number one, or you zone out during the tour because you're answering texts and having to ask them to repeat themselves, or just not actually listening to begin with. They need to see that you're interested and attentive. And that will help by putting off a good vibe of, wow, you really, so and such, whether it's me, whether Daniel, whoever, your name, insert your name, really cares. And I feel, they make me feel important. You got to silence your phones. So we've silenced our phone, we gotten our stuff out. What do? We talk about ourselves. Um, yes, you are having to make this pitch, right? Why are they having to use you? We need to talk about you. What makes you different from everyone else? Show why you're the best. So talk about yourself. Maybe at this point, also, it doesn't all have to be business related. By the way, talk about who you are. You have kids. You've noticed they have kids. Mention you have kids if you haven't already. Um, talk. Again, if you haven't brought up, finding commonalities, bring up some of those commonalities and chat with them a little bit about it. Make yourself seem presentable, make yourself seem likable. Talk about the company. Talk about what we do and how we do, and talk about the support staff that we have behind us that are second to none. Talk about the marketing that we do. Talk about that type of stuff. We have presentation documents. They're on the Google Drive somewhere. Duke can let us know where those are, but they're on the Google Drive somewhere. Get the present, utilize the tools and the stuff we have capable so that you're setting yourself up for success before you even walk in the door. But most important when you're sitting down to do this talk is to mirror the personalities. If you've been realizing that this person is a get to the point type of person, yes, you need to talk about yourself. Yes, you need to talk about your business. Maybe talk about a commonality, but you need to get to the point. This isn't a time to elaborate. You need to mirror personality. You don't want to lose them because they're a get to the point type person and you're not getting to the point. On the flip side, if there's somebody who, as you can kind of tell, loves the chat and loves the details and just is a people all around people person that just loves to talk to anyone and everyone about anything and everything, elaborate a little bit. Yeah, you don't want to be there for 2.5 hours, but at the same time, develop that friendship, develop that, again, personality mirroring, and you're not going to get that if you don't take the time to walk around and gather a little bit about who they are and how they do stuff by getting them to show you the house. So also at the same time, you're going to talk about numbers, right? You're going to explain what a CMA is, how you came to your number, and then show how it's justifiable. At some point, ask the homeowner what they want to get out of their house. Ask how they came to that number. If the number you gave and the number they gave are extremely far apart, pull up the MLS, whether you're using your computer or an iPad or whatever, pull up the MLS and look at homes, look at pictures. And the pictures, by the way, the pictures are key here in this instance. You can obviously show them like, hey, your neighbor's house is down the street is selling for $20,000 more because, oh, it's $200, 200 more square feet. That's an obvious one. But what if they're the same square footage? Why is that one $20,000 more than what you're telling them their home is worth? Pictures are key on this. If you show and point out like, hey, look at the granite countertops in this kitchen. Look at the really nice finishes. Look at the brand new appliances. You don't have to then be a massive jerk and be like, you don't have that. But what you can do is by pointing it out, they're going to recognize this. Most people, 99% of people you come across are going to be smart enough to understand that like your laminate countertops are not nearly as valuable as the brand new kitchen that they have sitting over here. Sorry, I lost my spot. And do it again, but in doing the CMA, don't do it in a way that's like, look at how much smarter I am than you. This is why I'm right and you're wrong. But rather simply, you need to do this to open their eyes to the fact of, hey, there's other stuff that you may not have considered. Again, it's not about you're trying to win them over to your side. You're not going to win them over to your side by dragging them through the dirt and showing like, haha, I'm better than you. I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm talking about. This is my job. You need to win them over by showing them and opening their eyes, right? It's all about, this is a completely different topic, but it's the, association of when you go to correct someone, are you doing it out of love or are you doing it in a way that's going to make them hate you because you're correcting them? Same principle going to be applied here. You're hoping to open their eyes so that they come around to seeing why you're saying what you're saying for their benefit, not for your benefit to prove you're right. Also, I will say this. You go into a listing presentation, let's say the house is around 300,000 and the homeowner is about, you and the homeowner about 10 grand difference, even 15 grand difference, high, low, whatever. Don't lose the listing over that. You can iron that out later. Ask them to justify it. Maybe say, hey, listen, let's say you're saying their house is worth 300, they're thinking 315. Again, go through the talks, go through the pictures, but then ultimately be like, hey, listen, maybe I'm wrong. I'd love to, I'd love for you to be right. Let me try to pull some numbers based on some stuff. And, but basically don't lose the deal. Don't rake them over the coals as much as if you're $40,000 difference, $50,000 difference. It doesn't make sense to do that over such a small, insignificant number. So you finish your listing presentation. You're almost done. What do you do? Well, one, that packet that I mentioned, you need to be able to leave that with them. Leave them the CMA, leave them some documents. I leave a blank listing presentation, actually, or sorry, not listing presentation, a listing agreement. I leave a blank listing agreement in with those documents. I'll even mention it. I'll point out that, hey, listen, I'm not here to have you sign something today, but I want you to be able to read over it so you can familiarize yourself with it. I will say this, you need to have a plan when you are leaving. Now, don't get me wrong. If they look at you and go, listen, Daniel, that was the best presentation I've ever heard. I want you, you're going to be it. Let's do it. Great. Stay, talk about some stuff, get some hard deadlines laid out, get some stuff, maybe talk about setting them up with the stager. That's always one that I drop right into, like, hey, that's great. If that's your goal, let me get you hooked up with our amazing stager, Kim. And I start talking about that. But if they haven't hinted or they directly state that they want to think on it, then what do? Well, you need to have a game plan to contact them back in some way, shape, or form. If they say they'll call you tomorrow, great, trust them on that. Give them tomorrow. If they don't contact you, then first thing that next morning after that, the day after tomorrow, good movie reference, text them or call them saying, hey, just checking in. Is there something you had questions about, need clarity on? I'm here to help in any capacity. Keep in contact. If they tell you, hey, listen, give us a few days, give them a couple days. But again, don't just, if it gets past the deadline that they've given you, don't keep waiting on them. You need to be the one that makes the point on that. Even if it ends up that, they didn't pick you, I'd rather know than not know. Make the call, make the game plan. It doesn't have to be a game plan with them specifically, but you need to have a game plan going into it when you leave of what to expect. Finally, I'm kind of at the end of my presentation here, but finally, I just want to reiterate about all of this. I gave you a lot of stuff that kind of how I do what I do, but you have to be you. There's been so many times when I first started in this business, Daniel graciously helped let me tag along to a lot of his listing presentations, how he did what he did. And Daniel probably recognizes some of the stuff I've said, but he also probably knows that realizes some of it's different. And that's because I took what Daniel did and I took what other people did and I turned it and made it mine. So if you have somebody you know of that you can go along with, ask them. If you're thinking about bringing a teammate onto a listing, make sure that you just check it with your potential client. Like, hey, is it cool if I have somebody that's from my coworker come along with me? Or again, as I mentioned during the first part, practice it. Go over it with people. Go over how you do it, and listen intently to others as they're doing theirs, because you're going to gather bits of wisdom throughout everybody's. I know I still have tons to learn through this. I'm still learning about it as I go, but I know other people can learn from me. And don't think, and think positively about yourself. You may have only done a couple of them, but everyone can learn from everyone in this instance. So that whole practicing and doing the role playing in these is actually extremely beneficial. But that's kind of, I don't know. Again, tailor them to you, be you, but pull from others. It's the best way to do it. So there.
Cool. I love the office and movie picture references.
Thank you. That was really great. It's always a great refresher to be reminded of a listing appointment. It's like, because there's, to me, one of the scariest parts about this business. Because that's like people's most prized possession that really.
Yeah.
And they're probably the most valuable, like personally and financially.
And what you said, right, is right, Rachel. You go in and like my biggest fear is like, I'm going to go in and they're thinking 350 and I'm thinking 275.
Yeah.
I don't want to insult them in that moment. So it's like, how do you approach that type of stuff?
Or they're like, do you like my homemade cat house that I have in my master bath? Those are the most scary because you don't want to offend people.
Well, and here's the thing too, and this is something that Daniel has mentioned before, and it is phenomenal. If they agree to go with you, and like if they say like, okay, hey Rachel, you're going to be my realtor. This is awesome. Let's do this thing. You don't have to talk about that nasty cat thing or whatever you just mentioned. You make him do it.
Yes.
You make her do it, right? You set up the pager and you get her to do it. Now, don't get me wrong. If they still have it in the house by the time the listings come around, then you're going to do it at that point. But honestly, like that's one of the biggest benefits. Is like in the way Kim told me this one time, or maybe it was in a group. I don't know. I think it was in a group one, which she came in and talked to us. And I say it to everybody that's going to work with. What you need to do is like tell your client, like, okay, so they picked you. That's great. And I say, hey, listen, my stager always wants me to say this. You can clean the house, but don't put your little knickknacks and stuff away. So many times Kim has that vision.
Yes.
You can like go in and find something and be like, that would be perfect over here. But if you as a client take it and put it away with the attempts to already declutter, she's not going to even know it exists. And so by saying that, a lot of times, if there is that object that you really don't want out, they're going to leave it out. And then let Kim be the one who looks at him and goes like, yeah, that would be great there. But that one probably needs to go away. But that's how Kim has asked me to say that, actually, believe it or I guess I think she did in that group. Was that right, Daniel? Do you remember that when she said, don't tell your clients not to put everything away?
Yeah, she'll use the stuff that they have, and I think that's also a good thing to say because it kind of, people are self-conscious about their things and their furniture and decoration. So if you like say, hey, there's a possibility she may want to use your stuff, because see, people are apprehensive about a stager because they imagine somebody coming in like on HGTV and telling them they need to all go Chip and Joanna and their style sucks and blah blah blah, all this stuff. But I think it's one nice, almost like an icebreaker, or a nice thing to say. It's like, keep your stuff out because she might use it.
Right. Well, and yeah, and I've said before too, like Kim is very good at taking what you have and utilizing what you already have in your house.
Yeah,
it's another great way to kind of.
I have a question.
I was not talking about country music awards.
That was hilarious. I have a question.
Yeah.
So I have not been on a listing appointment because the last one Kat had, it was like 9:00 at night. So I can't blame her for anything, but it wasn't her fault. But, so what do you do if the person is like super unrealistic? Like, I mean, I know how to be nice to people. And I know how to turn things into a positive thing. But like, if they're like, well, I don't understand why people would care about my laminate countertops. They look gorgeous. And you're like, but they don't. Like, obviously, you're not going to say that. But, like, but like
Well,
they look like they got them from the dollar store. And you have to be like, well, they, without saying, like, no, they're kind of ugly. Like, I don't know. That's my biggest fear when and if I go on one that they're going to be. And I don't know if this is going to happen. But, like, I just don't want these list sellers to think they have this ball in house and have unrealistic expectations, which obviously everyone does, but I don't know. That's
right. Well, I'll be honest with you. Like when it comes to like countertops or something like that, that's actually, in my opinion, something that's very obvious. One of the things you can talk about is simply the cost of the item, to be straight with you, right? Like granite countertops are far more expensive than like a laminate countertop. So even that right there, getting them to understand the simple complexity of like, the cost to do this in the kitchen versus the cost to do this in the kitchen is going to have a significant difference on the price of the house. A kitchen, you can easily spend 30 grand, 40 grand redoing a kitchen very easily. Right. And that's, so the idea behind that is just, again, but also going through the pictures and showing them, I feel like showing, again, if you're that far off, showing the MLS and going through the pictures is actually a pretty big deal.
Right.
Being able to explain that to them. But if it's just simply as like, it's just ugly, don't worry about that. I'll be honest with you. Like, again, Kim is going to be your super friend in this.
Right.
Using the stager is like the best route to go because they're going to be the one. It's not, the negative words are not coming from you at that point. You're all about positivity, like, hey, we can do this. Hey, we can handle this. And then Kim comes in and goes, I need to rethink this. Right. So there's that type of stuff to it. But honestly, Daniel and I have had this conversation before about a different listing before that I actually ultimately, and it sounds kind of crazy, turned down. When we were this far, and we were probably 40 grand off on like a $270,000 house, right? That's a huge number. And so basically like it's up to you at that point. Like you can, what I've actually said to homeowners before is I'd love to be proven wrong. Like I'd love to like we listed at your price and you would get your price, and I'm happy to do that. This is your home. I will list it at what you want it to be listed for. But setting those expectations of like, but I believe this is where we're at. So I'd love to make a game plan going forward that if we try it at your price for X amount, let's say a few weeks, and we really don't see the activity that we should be seeing, we might need to discuss doing a price drop to get you more in range with what aligns with your house. So agreeing with them that yes, I'd be happy to list it at that point, but ultimately telling, like not being negative. Does that make sense? There's a fine line right there. Like you can't be like, I think you're wrong, but being like, I understand and I would love for you to be right. I just feel like this is where we're supposed to be. So I'm happy to do that if you want to do that. I just, let's maybe potentially set a game plan going forward.
I feel like the easy part is like making it a positive, like being like, yeah, I totally agree. I would love to sell your house for 300,000 or whatever, But I think my biggest concern is people being so unrealistic, and you're like, come on, people.
Right.
I don't know. Yeah.
Scott makes a really good point there that like saying like yes, the positive side, but making sure to be like, I also would like to have a game plan that if we don't get the activity that we need, that you guys are going to be okay doing these price drops, because you don't want to get all the way to listing it and they're like, well, we would never drop to that number, and you're like, well, then we're never going to sell this house. Or if it's a situation where they're going to get like they won't be able to move to the next house if they don't get a certain number and you don't think that number's real, you will have to tell them that. Like you straight up, I actually told someone in Scott's neighborhood once that I was like, if you need this purchase price in order to feel comfortable buying the next house, then that concerns me that that you would be in that position, because the reality is your house was not going to sell for that.
Right. And I will say this too. Katerina is 100% correct on that. And I will say this too. It's all about setting those expectations. Like I think my previous ones with seller objections. You got to talk to them realistically about it as well. Like if a house sits for too long a period of time, and I've go over this with them, a house for too long a period of time, there can be nothing wrong with that house outside of the fact that it was priced too high. But what ends up happening is it gets a stigma attached to it that like, oh, there's got to be, it's been on the market for a month and a half. Why hasn't it moved? There's got to obviously be something wrong with it. And now you're going to end up, people aren't going to either want to even look at it, even though they might fully be able to, or two, when they do make an offer, they're coming in, they're expecting something, they're looking at it going like, there's got to be something wrong with this. And so you tell them like, hey, we need to stay ahead of that bad curve. We need to stay ahead of that curve to the point where like, if we sit for so long, what can we do? We need to not be sitting for so long. So how do we prevent that? Well, we need to be looking at the price drop. We need to make sure that we're staying competitive with what's going on around us. And this is thing make me think of something else. CMAs, we always do them based upon what's pending or what's sold, because you're not really supposed to use actives just because somebody's asking a certain price for something doesn't mean it's actually going to sell for X dollars, right? Just because I want $100 for a pair of shoes doesn't mean they're worth $100, right? They might only be worth $50. But the point is that like when you're talking to your client, like I go over that, but I also point out like, and Daniel does this as well, use the pending, use the sold, but then you use the MLS to show like, okay, so let's say we do list your home for $315. Let's look at the active market. Let's look at what we're going up against. Are we going to be competitive with the way your house is finished, with the way the square footage, all this, and versus what are we right up against in the immediate vicinity? And it's a good way to kind of, so you're talking about, it's a good way to open their eyes and get them to recognize what they're doing.
Yep. They say the greatest form of discovery is self-discovery versus somebody telling somebody what to think. And so guiding them through the right price is the best way that I've learned. Guiding them to the price that you believe, and them discovering it themselves through looking at the active listings, looking at the sold listings, looking at the kitchens that the other people have, looking at whatever. I'll give an analogy or a lesson that that Anthony LaMacchia gave. Can y'all see this right here? Wait, hold on. Can you see that?
Yeah.
So if you come into a house and you are one of 3 agents and they're just wanting to know like what it's going to be priced at, and you're the agent that says it's worth 250, and another agent says 275, another agent says 240, you're going to be labeled as this guy, the agent that said the 250 agent. That's what they're going to remember. But if you guide them to it by showing them photos, educating them, and helping them say it themselves, it's a much better approach that they can receive.
One of the tactics I've used, Ashley, I know you were just talking about like how do you say like the bad stuff really. One of the tactics I've used, and it seems to go over pretty well, is throughout the process I kind of mentioned like I'm going to be as honest. Go over the numbers. I don't ask them what they want for their house before I start talking about the numbers. I go over all my numbers. I actually will then tell them what I think that their home. And most times, by the way, I'm not giving a specific number. I'm giving a range, by the way.
I think I've heard you say that before in the training or something.
Yeah.
You're like I think it's worth, or I think we could sell it at X. What do you think?
And I give them a range. And then after I do that, I actually intentionally point out, I want to point out something, and I'll say it like this. I want to point out something. Have you noticed I have not asked you what you want for your house? And there's a reason for that. I don't want you to ever think I'm telling you what you want to hear. I want you to think I'm telling you my honest truth and trying to help you in the best way I can see possible. And seriously, I think it goes over really well with people. Because again, and I'll point it out, like Daniel just said, those numbers slapped on your forehead like that. I'll even point it out. Like if I know they're interviewing, and this is, again, you are competing in some instances with other agents. If I know that, I will tell them, I don't want you to think that I am, and I'll explain what I mean by it, but I'll tell them, I don't want you to ever think I'm buying your listing. I don't want you to think I'm going to tell you a number that your home is worth just because I think you're going to then pick me because I told you it was worth more than somebody else. I want you to know that I'm going to be an honest, hard worker, and this is what I think it's going to be worth. And maybe I'm wrong slightly, and based upon let's say we look up more numbers and do all that. But again, I don't know. That's a tactic that I use. It doesn't mean that everybody, again, as I pointed out as throughout my meeting twice, be you. If you don't think that's more of your style, then don't use that. But that's how I said I like to approach somebody is like, I don't want you to ever think I'm trying to buy it. I don't want you to ever try to think that I'm just telling you what you want to hear so that you ultimately pick me at the end.
Right. Because I feel like if someone's like, oh, well, I owe $250, I have to get that. Well, then you can't ignore that. They literally just told you. You can't be like, no, don't tell me that. But I like that tactic because that's kind of like what Katarina did with my house and helping me price it. Like, I didn't really tell her how much I had to get off of it until we decided a price that she thought was like competitive. And I felt like that was something that I would appreciate as a seller in the future, Yeah.
And then I finish after I say that. I do say, now that being said, what had you been thinking numbers? Had you been looking at numbers? Have you had an idea about what you would want? Like I give them the opportunity to then say it. That way we can discuss it, But I do make sure to point out that hey, I'm not here, I'm not here to just give you fluff. Like I'm here to actually genuinely help you. And hopefully that's why you're hiring me.
You know what? One thing I've noticed, I go on Zillow and look at that number before I show up because they've looked at that number. They have.
Agreed. Yeah. 100%.
So they have that in their mind as what they think they can get for the house, period. No matter what you say, they have a number in their mind. And then I ask them what they think their house is worth before we do anything else. Cause I want to see like where their brains are. So I'm like, any idea what you think your house is worth? Right. And then they tell you, and then you work from there.
Right. That's one way. Another way I've brought up, Rachel, is when you talk about Zillow, because I'll actually preemptively start talking about Zillow before I know that they'll actually bring it up. And
it's like, I want to see what's going on in their brain before I have to battle it. Because like some people are right there and you didn't even have to waste your breath trying to convince them. Or I have done it a couple times where I've tried to convince them before they've said anything, and then like they were settled on a lower price to begin with that I thought was reasonable, and I'm trying to like stretch it, you know what I mean? And I'm like, dang, I should have just asked them to begin with.
Yeah. Like I said, and again, I am not saying there are one right way, wrong way, whatever. Be you. You guys are, and that you found that to be successful, and that's awesome. Do it. That's what that's. But again, the Zillow thing, I brought up Zillow before, and Daniel, I had just joined the team, and Daniel had me do an open house. You remember that listing, DK, down on it was just off of 6, right? Crap. It was that tiny little rancher that we sold, and then they ultimately ended up buying a house in the West End. You know what I'm talking about? It was Tim and your mic's muted, by the way. Tim and
Oh yeah, Crumb Run,
Crumb Run.
Lindsay. Yeah,
right, that little house. And when they were thinking about selling it on their own, and they were going to, Zillow had told them that their house was worth around $175,000. Daniel did the numbers. I was doing the open house, and so he was telling me about this. Daniel did the numbers and realized that their house should be worth somewhere around $220,000 to $225,000. So we're literally talking a $50,000 difference. We put the house on the market. I did on a Thursday or a Friday. I did the open house that Sunday. They had a full price offer in hand signed Monday morning. I bring that up to people, pointing out that, listen, Zillow can be great in some instances, and sometimes in neighborhoods, specifically bigger neighborhoods, it is fairly accurate. Like Zillow does have, they're successful for a reason. One of their reasons is they have algorithms that do seem to work sometimes. However, especially if you're going out and listing like a something of a rural property or a more unique property, Zillow doesn't take into consideration some of that stuff. And so sometimes like you can go on there and the range can be unbelievably massive. But I point that out for a reason, to that way of like if they're using Zillow as their crutch and we are far apart, I can say, look, it says actually on Zillow's website, you can find one of their clarifiers that tells you there's actually a percentage. There's a certain percentage. They're trying to be a certain percentage close to it, and they can be a certain percentage off even after they've done their numbers, and they can still consider that within range. It's purely a numbers thing. That's it's a percentage. And then I've told them before, and it happened with that house, and I've seen it happen with so many other houses we've listed. And I challenge you guys to do this as well. If you're about to have a listing, or in the future, just think about it. Look at the most on Zillow. When you list it, give it a couple days, and then go check Zillow. Zillow's going to have altered their numbers to match closer to what you've done. And again, it's kind of proving the point that like Zillow's there. It's good as a reference point, and that's how I'll say it sometimes to a client. It's good as a reference point, but it's not something to be 100% sold on as being like, I'm going to live off of this. Sorry, I mean that banana.
Yeah, Zillow claims 8% national average accuracy or something like that, 8% up or down, which is really 16% could be off on an average, but I mean sometimes they're 50% or hundreds of percent off. But the only reason they can claim that that close of percentages, because like you said, Scott, like they'll say, okay, this house we think it's worth 175, and then we list a house for 225, and then all of a sudden their estimate is 220, and we sell it, and they're like, see, we were right, and they pad their numbers. It's one of the biggest scams that people don't realize, that Zillow's estimate is padded based off of the listing price of the house. That's a big part of their algorithm.
Yeah, my first personal house that I sold, Zillow had it like $90,000 under what I listed it for. And then, it changed. It didn't change it all the way up to my listing price, because I think the Zillow was like, we just can't justify that. Although I did sell it at that number. But when I listed it, it went up like the Zestimate went up like $70,000 when I listed. It was ridiculous.
Yep.
And then the appraisal comes.
It didn't appraise the first time. Actually, I had to sell it again. But
yeah, I remember that. That was hilarious.
I just had appraisal PTSD myself, so
I'm
still coming down from that.
I guess I'll sell this house again, and I did, and it was fine.
You must not have had an FHA. Lovely appraisal.
Hey, one thing for appraisal, and I got a point to make. I don't care if they filled out a survey. I don't care if your clients filled out a survey and told you the square footage of their house. I don't care if they've just told you what the square footage of their house is. Base your numbers off of what the tax records say. period. You can royally screw yourself. Me, I did this by listening to your client instead of listening to what is actually recorded somewhere.
True.
So again, now, hey, listen, if it ends up that the county ultimately is wrong and you can tell, like, listen, hey guys, if you think you're right 100%, how do we prove it? Get them to hire an
Measure.
appraiser. Get them to hire an appraiser and tell them, like, listen, let's just spend the $350, $400 right now up front. It will obviously, if you're right, it's going to more than pay off. And you can tell them, I mean, think about it seriously. If they think their house is, let's say, 300 square feet bigger than it really is, it's listed. If they pay $350, $400 right now out of pocket to prove that they are right, they're going to more than make that up in the sale of their house based upon the numbers that you've done numbers based on a 300 square foot smaller.
And it only costs actually $100. I just paid somebody $100 to measure it because the tax records were wrong that I had on the listing. They were wrong. And I paid somebody,
Now,
it was only $100 and it
Was
was
that just a measurement,
worth it.
or was that an appraiser actually doing it?
Appraiser did
Okay.
it. They just did the measurement. They didn't do anything else. They literally
That's fine.
went in
And the
and
only reason
measured.
I say that is because on the MLS, there's a spot that says, like, when you fill it in, you can list like a square footage, and you can say per tax, or you can say per appraiser. So I would just make, I would just make sure you'd have somebody licensed to do it. That way, you're referencing something that was actually.
Yes.
Does that make
No.
sense?
Yes.
Their opinion. But yeah, because like my guys just lost on a $179,000 house. They just lost $9,000. The appraiser came back at 170, and it's because, hey, listen, I even told them I took partial blame on it. Like, I based it off of the numbers they gave me. They told me it was a certain square footage, and ended up it wasn't that square footage. And yeah, at that point, the appraiser emails me. He's like, "Can you justify your price?" And I was just like, "No." I mean, like, I know that sounds terrible, but like, I based it off of a higher square footage house. So at that point,
Me too.
the numbers, like, is it justifiable? Not really, because I was wrong.
I love you guys. I have to go to work now.
All right.
You did great.
Yeah,
I'm leaving.
that's it.
Goodbye.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks, Nance. Appreciate
Peace
it all.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. That was
Yep.
cool.
Yeah, Vince.
And if
Okay,
We have
that's
these
Scott.
recorded,
Thank you.
so
Thank you, Scott.
I'm not
Yep.
someone who do country music